Educated as an engineer, bachelor's, master's in engineering. I then spent 12 years in various startups. So I have done the startup journey, albeit a while ago. Um, and then one day, a relatively sort of mid-size Amazon called me. And I say mid-size, it was 10,000 people. I thought it was enormous. But of course, now it's like 1.5 million. So 10,000 seems very small. In any case, I spent 15 years there, going from a senior manager to a director to a vice president, built a bunch of things you probably know, most notably Prime Video. I left in 2020 um, to coach, to teach, realizing that I preferred to share my knowledge of how to succeed because I saw so many people struggling for reasons I thought were preventable. And I was frustrated that I didn't have a venue to help them within the company, at least at the same scale I do now. So let's jump in. When we talk about managing up, there's a few buckets, and I'm going to start with communication. So we're going to talk about understanding your manager and effective communication. And of course, you might ask, like, why do I have to understand my manager? Like, isn't that what they're paid for, to understand me? Well, um, a lesson that will apply to a lot of things in your career is there's many, many things that should happen. Your work should be recognized. Your reviews should be fair, etc. If you wait around for the word should to come true, you'll be very disappointed. So I recommend you take action into your own hands. So when it comes to understanding your manager, there's a few tips here, and I'm going to be going relatively quickly through these slides. But basically, you have to understand your manager's communication style. Some people like you to walk into their office if you're in person. Some people like voicemails. Some like emails. Some like a lot of detail. Some want just the bottom line. Figuring that out will make it easier to work with your manager. Same thing, knowing what they like or dislike, their so-called pet peeves, you can ask others if you don't already know those. Having a sense of their strengths and weaknesses. Even good managers have flaws. Um, and then you can also share with them your own style and best environment. You can say, hey, if it's okay with you, I like to work with a lot of space. Or actually, if it's okay with you, I like frequent feedback. So an action to think about is, can you explain your manager's style? Could you do that? To someone else? Do you feel you could do that and do it well, or that you'd be kind of guessing? There are some tools to understand your manager. These are all the different personality tests. But a fun one that, if you've not used it, there's this tool called Crystal Nose. And Crystal Nose is it's a Chrome plugin that will actually look at a LinkedIn profile or other things and give you a personality profile of the author. And it's pretty good at that. And so if you're wondering, like, how does my boss really think? You don't necessarily have to guess. You can also use some analytical tools based on how they write. By the way, try it on yourself if you have a LinkedIn profile. Your writing gives away a lot about your personality. The last time I ran this, it pegged me pretty accurately. Somebody says there's no senior. Well, this is chat. I'm being distracted. Someone asked if there's a senior director level in Amazon. I'm going to close the chat window so I don't get distracted, but the answer is no. They've left it blank for all these years. So anyway, back to the talk. So there's all these different tools. Some companies use personality tests internally, and many managers have taken them. If you want to have an interesting discussion with them, you can ask them if they know their Myers-Briggs type or something else. You can share your own. It's a good way to start a conversation about how the two of you might work together better. Let's talk a little bit then about communicating up to your manager. Few things. First, managers are busy, and the higher the level of the manager, often the busier and more distracted they are. So they appreciate three things: clarity, brevity, and timeliness. If you like a fun way to remember this, it's in meetings with leaders: be bright, be quick, be gone. Know your stuff, say it, and leave. It's also, you want to label or discriminate. These are facts. These are things that are actually factual. This is my opinion or analysis. I think managers, leaders like myself always want options or alternatives. Okay, what are our choices? What are the trade-offs? What else have you thought about? Um, just presenting we should do X doesn't show me enough of your thinking. It's like on a test, it doesn't give me enough of your marks. The last piece here is active listening. If you're not familiar with active listening, it means being able to paraphrase what you heard back to the person and confirm. So it's where you can say to your manager, okay, so I understood that project X is the most important, and my first priority from your viewpoint is to sync up with this other team to make sure we're aligned. Is that right? And that kind of listening prevents errors, but also makes people feel heard. So look, managing up is about both exchanging information and about building relationship and trust. It's both pieces. And communication is always about sharing good information and building relationship. And again, some engineers, some introverts, even some extroverts feel like, why do I have to do that? If I do good work, why is that my problem? It's not if you don't want a good relationship. But since relationship and clear communication are so key to your career success, if you want to manage up well, you invest a little effort in this and you learn a few of the skills. So a quick story to illustrate this at its extreme. I was in an Amazon board meeting with Bezos when he was CEO and the entire board, and I ran part of the Amazon games unit. So I was there with the other games vice presidents. There were three of us basically. Emmett Shear, who runs Twitch or founded Twitch that we bought, and one of my peers and myself. And Jeff was asking us a question in front of his board of directors. He said, okay, if everything in Amazon games goes well, we're going to assume it goes well for a minute. We're not asking about bad case, we're asking about best case. Are we on track to compete with Tencent, the largest gaming company in the world? And he obviously wanted to be. And I looked right at him immediately and simply said, no. Now, the great thing about saying no is that it's incredibly clear. And one of the lessons here is I could have given a big explanation and said, so that means no. But by saying no up front, I made it super clear and unambiguous right out of the gate. Now, you can't just say no to the CEO of Amazon when he asks a question like that. So I did go on to explain why at that time we were in no way on a track to compete with Tencent in video games. And he was fine with the explanation. This is key. He simply wanted to know. And sure, he wanted the answer to be yes. But since I had a coherent fact-based explanation for why it was not true, he was fine. Now, he wasn't happy and he wanted us to go change that. But he wasn't like, it wasn't some problem. So if I can say no to Jeff, and by the way, I wasn't like his best buddy or something, you can say no to your boss. You can be clear. All right. If you want deeper advice on this, I'll give you several books to look at over the course of these slides. A classic in this space is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's available for free because it's super old. If you don't want to pay for it, it's available as an audiobook. It's been updated. It was published in 1937 and it's still relevant today. So I'm going to keep moving. So we have plenty of time for Q&A. I'm going to talk about tricky situations you may run into at work. These are all the hard cases. So I've given you like the general, okay, what happens when it gets sticky? What about when there's a problem? How do I get involved in decision making? What if there's conflict? What if I don't agree with my boss and I want to manage up and tell them they're wrong, in my opinion, or they're missing something? And how do I give upward feedback? Like, hey, you're micromanaging me. So we're going to go through all of those now. So first, problem solving and decision making. A lot of problem solving with a manager is made better if you're more proactive. Avoid surprises, be ahead of the problem, not behind. In other words, classic case for a developer, something you're working on is going to be late. If you wait until the day it's due to tell me that, I'm going to feel surprised. I'm going to feel betrayed. I may have made commitments to others, so now I have to scramble. If you tell me a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance and give me some options, I have more time to react. It builds my trust. So avoid surprises. Never surprise your boss. Second, if you want to be involved in decision making, you need to ask to be involved. So go ahead and go to your manager and say, look, I know we need to make a big technical decision or we're solving this problem. How can I help? How can I bring value? What data do you need? I want to propose that we use this tool or this architecture. Now, another thing that may not seem fair, but I'm not here about fair. This is really important. I'm only here to make you effective. I don't care if you like it or not. When you're working on a problem or when you're debating a decision, you have to manage your emotions. You can be strong and vocal, but if you start to look upset or if you start to shut down and not be able to speak, you will lose your voice. Because if you're upset, I'll figure, well, you're just ranting. And if you stop speaking, I won't know what you had to say, and I'll move on, probably. So remember to manage your emotions. And if you have trouble doing this, go offline into writing or ask if you can follow up. And this is where remembering all that work in the earlier slides to learn your manager's style really matter. How have other people successfully influenced your manager? How have they challenged your manager? How have they invited your manager to move from demanding results to problem solving with you? Remember, most negative discussions, and this is surprising, can be turned into collaborative discussions if you show the person you heard them and then pivot. And so you say, look, I understand you're very upset that we had a big bug and we had to roll back the release. That's a reasonable thing. It's unfortunate that happened. But can you move on from that to discuss options for how we're all going to fix it together today? And then we can discuss why it happened tomorrow. Most people will follow you through that pivot. They'll stop ranting about how could you screw this up so badly and move on to what are we going to do about it if you invite them down that path. On the other hand, if you get into, well, it wasn't our fault, then you're in a different fight. So a good question, good action, depending on where you are. For some of you, it's the morning. For some of you, it's the evening. What can you do proactively, either still today or tomorrow, to get ahead of a problem on your team, if you need to? Now, conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is essentially when problems have gotten worse, right? It's an extreme case of problems and decisions. So again, in a conflict, the first thing is to try to understand, to ask more questions and make sure you understand what's going on, because often conflicts are either partially or entirely misunderstandings. The other piece is when a conflict begins, conflict can mean the two of us disagree, or it can mean the two of us are arguing. Again, arguing is not usually positive. Disagreeing, where you remain calm, you pick a good time, you may have a third person in the room who can help facilitate, and you've built relationship trust in advance, you can talk about very hard things calmly and get somewhere. If you lose track of that, generally managers, particularly less skilled managers, don't want to be publicly humiliated. And so they will shut you down to show that they keep control if you get emotional. I would also say know when to quit or compromise. Sometimes the right thing to do is say, sure, we'll do it that way. Engineers are taught all through school that there is a right answer and it's important to be right. I agree with that. However, there are also different solutions to problems, all of which can work. And not every hill is worth dying over because you believe in a particular architecture. So, a couple quick things. Some managers, most managers, have a weakness that under stress, they revert to some less functional management style. They freeze up, they blame, they ask for a lot of details. Each flaw is different, but knowing what what does your manager do under pressure? The last time they were under pressure or there was a big problem or conflict, how did they handle it? They probably will handle it the same way. If you've seen them in a conflict before, then you have no right to be surprised or blindsided by whatever it is they do. Instead, you can anticipate it coming and say, okay, I know my boss freaks out when it looks like we're going to miss a schedule for their boss. I have to tell them bad news. How am I going to manage through that? How am I going to get in front of the problem that's obviously coming? Now, another story. When I was working at Amazon Games, same time I was presented to Jeff in the previous story, I actually had two different vice presidents at the same time, one within Amazon, one within our subsidiary Twitch, and I was managing a couple hundred people for each of them. This is a super abnormal leadership structure, which most people would never let happen. But I wanted to do the job this way, and I convinced both VPs to let me. Now, I did that because the work that needed to be done both within Amazon and within its subsidiary overlapped, and that was us building Prime Gaming, the gaming pillar of Amazon Prime. The point is, though, I had to keep not one, but two actual managers happy when I managed hundreds of people for each of them. I managed to do this for about 3 years. Then their priorities started to conflict with me in the middle, and I had to get out of that role. But the point is, if it's possible to manage two different managers at once, you can manage one well, even when they're in a conflict. And I can talk more about that if we get to Q&A and you want to know more about it. Eventually, I did run into a conflict I couldn't handle, and at that point, I didn't choose sides. I chose teams. I said, well, I'm going to turn over this team and go work with that one because you two can't agree on what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. All right, let's talk a little bit about giving upward feedback. So you want to actually tell your boss they can improve. If you've never thought about this, hey, if you have a good manager or even a mediocre manager, they're open to feedback. They're not perfect. This is similar to conflict resolution, though. It's a sensitive topic, and you better have a good relationship, right? If you just had a fight with your boss, then also telling them that you'd like to give them some feedback probably isn't going to go that well. On the other hand, if you're a top performer and you've built a little bit of a personal relationship with them, you can pull them aside and say, can I share something that would make my job easier or that would really help the team? So choose your battles. Also, notice what I did. I said, can I share something? That's me asking permission. Never try to cram feedback down, particularly a superior's throat, and say, I have 3 things to tell you, so listen up. That's obviously not going to work. Instead, go to them and say, hey, I've noticed a couple of things on the team. Is now a good time that I could share a few insights, or would you like me to do that later? You can bring examples. They're called situation behavior impact is one way to look at it. What that means is rather than saying, you did this wrong, instead you say, do you remember that meeting we had yesterday about the customer problem? That's the situation. In that meeting, you told us that we weren't paying enough attention to a big customer. That was your behavior. The impact is we felt you didn't realize how much time we had spent with the customer and we're just reacting out of your own frustration. That's the impact. But you break it up that way. And Also, the impact you talk about is I felt. See, nobody can tell. You can tell me that I shouldn't feel something, but most people won't do that. Oh, you shouldn't feel I yelled at you. Interesting. Your voice was like, whereas if I say you yelled at me, you can say, no, I didn't. But if I say I felt like you were yelling, I felt yelled at, that's harder for someone to say, well, I'm inside your head and can tell you you didn't actually feel that. So the last part is, if you want to tell your manager something, be ready to bring in some backup, but don't make that a gang up. If you put a manager on the spot in public, they have to maintain their image and their authority, and that may go badly. But it is good if you have an ally and say, look, I'm sharing this feedback, but I know Phil and Jane both feel the same way. So feel free to ask them. Now, you don't throw those people under the bus. You say, hey, I'm going to go tell the boss these things. If he wants to hear more, are you willing to back me up? Now, this illustration comes from a time where I screwed this all up, and my team actually gave me this illustration. The details don't matter, but we were building something and it wasn't going well. And I kind of told I managed managers. I told a couple of my managers, you're not doing enough. You need to do this, you need to do that. And I started to say cornered. They came to me the next day and said, that message was not in good taste. We don't agree with it. And sure, there are problems, but you're part of them. And so they gave me this picture and said, we need the picture on the bottom. We need you to be the leader who's helping us pull, not the guy sitting at the desk yelling. And, I keep this illustration, refer to it, and tell the story because I learned a lot that I needed to be the person down at the bottom helping pull, not the person sitting at the desk. If you have trouble with this, there are two classic books on how to have hard conversation. One of them is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. The other is Crucial Conversations. It's got like half a dozen academic authors. Radical Candor is more like a story of one woman's journey becoming a leader. Crucial Conversations is more of like a toolkit and scientific method. But between these two, you can gain the skills for how to have hard conversations with whoever you need, including your manager. So if you haven't read something like this, consider it. Last area, then we'll be into Q&A. What if you want to develop yourself? What if you want to go ask your manager, hey, help me out, help me grow? So I want to get good feedback from you. So some of these rules you may know, but ask for feedback more often than your annual review. Don't just wait until your annual review and be surprised. At the same time, don't nag. The right cadence here is ask every 2 to 3 months, I think, or when a big project completes. Hey, project food just finished. How did that go? I think I did X and Y well. I could have done Z a little better. Do you have other feedback for me? You have a conversation like that. Second thing, if you want feedback, some managers are afraid to give you feedback. You have to give managers and other people, you have to give them permission to say, hey, look, I really want your feedback so I can know what I'm doing well. Ask for the positive feedback, right? What am I doing well? And also where I can grow. Then when you get feedback, say thank you, even if you disagree with it, because at least you know what they believe that you don't agree with. So always say thank you, because if you don't say thank you, no one will give you feedback again, right? I once had someone ask me for feedback. I will shorten the story in the interest of time. She asked me for feedback. I gave her some. She immediately argued with me and told me how wrong I was. Did it change my mind about the feedback? Nope. What it did was convince me, oh, not only doesn't she see the problem, she doesn't take feedback well. So she was trying to do something to raise my opinion, asking for feedback, and in fact, she lowered it. So be careful that you really are open to feedback. Now, what do you do if you really disagree? This is something people like to ask. Like, oh, but the feedback's wrong, Ethan. It's wrong. It's not right. What do I do? Well, ask for examples, right? Many people give general feedback. Well, your code's not very clean. You don't do enough code reviews, whatever. Something broad. Ask them, can you provide me either now or over time with some examples so I know what you're talking about? Can you show me that? I'm open to it. I want to do better if you believe that, but can you show me? Get the specifics. And then you ask honest questions like, can you tell me why you believe that? I'm accepting what I hear, but I don't know what to do about it. Can you give me more details? Can you tell me why you believe that? Can you tell me what would be better? Another way to handle feedback is ask for what would be better. Some managers are very poor at giving feedback. These are some ways to get it, so go ask. Now, what if you want to grow? What if you want to get to the next role as an engineer? You want to work on a bigger project, a different technology, get a pay raise, whatever. On Taro, I've already shared a whole class on this, but you have to, this is a one slide summary. You have to know where you want to grow. In other words, just hoping to grow isn't a plan. Have a plan, know what you're asking for. Second, I'm not going to help you grow or want to help you as an engineer or as any other role if you're not doing a good basic job in your current role first. So before you go ask to do more or ask how you can get promoted, do what was on the slide before this and confirm that I don't have a long list of things I think you need to improve. Because if I have that list, I'm not going to help you grow. And in fact, I'm going to think you're clueless. Instead, make sure you're on good footing and then say, great, how can I get to this next place? And then, yes, ask for opportunities, but expect to work harder. Like, managers help those people who are helping them. People who just come and say, well, I'd like to be a vice president in 2 years, but don't have either a plan or what they're going to do to get there, it's not interesting to me. It's just like, oh, okay, well, I'd like to win the lottery tomorrow too. So again, the action item here is go ask. I do say managers love to say, keep doing what you're doing. You go back to them and say, well, my career is important to me. I want to have a more specific plan than just an open-ended keep doing what I'm doing. Can we talk about the timeline, the specific ways I can grow? I need that for my career. And I have said to a manager, my career is very important to me. I need to know how important it is to Amazon, because if it's not as important to Amazon as it is to me, I need to take that into consideration. Now I use those exact words, and that's a really nice way to threaten to quit. It's very hard but notice what I did. Even though absolutely unambiguously I was saying, well, help me out here, I'm quitting, or I might quit. I never threatened, and nothing I said was impeachable, meaning my manager in that situation couldn't say, well, your career shouldn't be important to you. That's absurd. You should just work for us because we pay you. No one would say that. So I cornered them very nicely with like velvet gloves. Learning to do that is part of career success. If you want to get good at asking, by the way, there's a fun book called Rejection Proof. And it's the story of one guy who hated to ask for hard things, figuring out how to do it. He also recorded himself doing all this on his iPhone, and it's all on YouTube. So if you don't want to read and you want to watch YouTube videos, you can find this guy's YouTube channel and watch him asking for absurd things and getting better at it. His most famous and viral video, he went into a Krispy Kreme donut shop, if you're familiar with that, and asked if they would make him a special donut in the shape and color of the Olympic rings. And he was hoping they'd say, no, you're crazy, so he could get used to rejection. But what in fact happened is they made him the donut. And what he found was he got good at asking, and people did lots of things he didn't think they would do. Okay, so one or two more slides. Another problem people run into is they ask me about frequent manager churn. What do I do if I'm trying to grow, but it seems like I get a new boss every 6 months? I'm either reorged or they leave, etc. Well, this is real. If you're trying to grow and you're trying to manage up, you need to get good at rebuilding trust with new managers because it will happen again and again over time. So expect to repeat the process of assessing style and earning trust. And then while you may lose your manager, you probably won't lose all your peers and all your manager's peers and your skip level, at least not all at the same time. And so to keep your career moving, you build relationships with all of those people so that the manager is surrounded by people that like you and will say, what a great employee and hard worker and brilliant mind you are. You can also seek stable managers. That's a little bit tricky, but the way to do it is look at people that have been at the company a long time and seem like they like it there. New managers are more likely to depart. So with that, a quick summary. I'm not going to read it all to you because I think we should go to Q&A. But these are some of the points we talked about. And if you want to find me, I know Rahul put my LinkedIn in chat, so we can use that as a way to find me. And so with that, I'm going to stop the share. And Rahul, if you want to MC questions, I'm available.
Yeah, perfect. I appreciate all of the brilliant insight, Ethan. I actually am going to drop 3 links in the chat. One is the course that Ethan mentioned about managing up. This is hosted on Taro, and it's one of the top rated courses we have. So I would encourage people to check it out. LinkedIn is, I think, the most prolific platform that you're on. Ethan, I think you post almost every
Yep,
day, which is a lot of
that's
good
right.
stuff
I
there.
do.
And then Substack. I think there's
Yep.
also a growing community of people following you on Substack. So I would encourage everyone to follow all 3. Is there anything else that you want to point people to?
No, I just say Substack is where I go deeper. You know, LinkedIn is limited to 3,000 characters, so there's only so much you can do, and I go deeper on Substack.
Perfect. Okay, so here is what I'm thinking in the next 15 minutes or so. I have a couple questions I pulled out from the chat that I thought were really good. And then after I ask those, then we can open it up and let people in the audience unmute and ask a question directly. Okay,
How about it?
so the first one I wanted to ask is, I think a really critical part of building that relationship with the manager is a one-on-one. Hopefully a weekly or bi-weekly half-hour session with your manager. Can you share high level 2 or 3 tips on how to have the most productive one-on-one?
Absolutely. Number one, you don't want your one-on-ones to be only status. So neither should you plan on using them only to talk about what you've done this week, nor if that's what your manager always wants, which is, oh, tell me what you've done, tell me what problems you're facing. Do you want that to be everything? For one reason, that can all be written down. So the two-piece action that comes out of this is first, if your manager likes a lot of status, send them that offline in advance and say, hey, I wrote everything down so that we can talk about some other stuff. I wrote the status down. Second, take an agenda, or even better yet, send them a short agenda and say, this week I'd like to talk about how, my problems with Project Foo, or my next step in, learning this particular engineering discipline, or whatever it is you want. But what makes a lousy one-on-one is if you come in and look at me as the manager and are like, okay, I'm here for my meeting, and have nothing on your mind. Or same thing can be bad if I do that, but that's on me. If you create an agenda, the best agenda lists what you want to talk about. It covers critical issues, sure, but then also your growth. And it puts an opening in and says, I'd also love to know, this is my proposed agenda, but if you have anything that needs to supersede this, let me know. And this is always kind of a great attitude to take with leaders, which is, I have picked up all the burden and I have a complete plan, but I understand that you as the manager are in charge and may know things I don't. So if you want to change the plan, that's fine. So either A, manager, you can be lazy and go with my plan, or B, if you need to change it, I'm good with that. And that kind of attitude builds trust and makes effective one-on-one.
This question was about like the direct manager relationship, and I think that's what people often refer to or think about immediately when they think about managing up. But you shared the
Yep.
story, Ethan, about the Jeff Bezos review where you talked about games and you told him point blank that, okay, we're not on track. So that's an example of, I guess he was your skip level manager, or maybe
Here's my
like
skip. Yeah.
he was your skip. So Hamza had a question earlier in the chat. If I'm in a senior role in a particular company or organization, how important is it for me to have a one-on-one rapport with my skip manager or maybe my skip levels manager? So like, my 3 levels above. They might
Yep.
not have as much awareness of what I'm doing. So how important is it that I kind of manufacture scenarios where I interact with them?
Uh, well, so it is important to have a relationship. I don't like your use of the word manufacture. I understand it was just colloquial, but um, it's much better to interact on value. So, of course, as a VP, my organization was 5 or 6 layers deep. I would have directors under me, then senior managers, then engineers, roughly. So, engineers would email me and say, "Hey, can I have a one-on-one? Can I get to know you?" Um, my answer back to them was always, "Well, what do you actually want to talk about?" Like, and then I would put a requirement on them and say, "Look, I will take some time and have a one-on-one with you, but you got to bring me something interesting. Bring me a problem, bring me a proposal, bring me a solution, show me something you're doing, but it's got to be two-way. In other words, it's just I don't have time. I had 800 people at my largest team to just hang out with 800 people, and so the point here is if you want to talk to your skip or your skip, either do it in the line of business or reach out and say, "Hey, I know you're busy. I know you have 200 people at my level, but I've built this tool. I've discovered this thing. I've created reports in a dashboard that I think you can use. Can I have 15 minutes to show you this thing I think will help you or to share with you this insight?" Um, uh, with my share with you this insight I have so that you can benefit from it. And managers, see, let's talk about the mind of the leader and the skip. The skip is incredibly busy, but they're also slightly afraid that they're out of touch.
Hmm.
And so if you offer to help them get in touch with what's going on at your level in a succinct way, remember, be bright, be quick, be gone, they're interested in that. If you say, "Hey, I know you have many projects, but I'm the lead engineer on project complexity, and complexity is a big initiative for you. Could we take 15 minutes and I'll give you a quick overview of complexity, and I'd also like to get to know you a little bit since I work in your organization." And a great question to ask your skip is, "I recognize I don't have all the context you have. I want to do a great job for you and the organization. What context would you be able to share with me so that I can make the right daily decision to meet your goals?" Everything in that says, "I'm here to help you, but I need your help to do that." And good managers will say, "Oh, this person is sharp."
Would
So,
you recommend in that scenario, is there a
yep.
way to avoid feeling like your manager feeling like you are going and kind of subverting their authority or their power by going to the skip and saying, hey, here's a problem you should know about? Well, as a manager, I wish you would have told me first before you went to my boss.
Yeah. So, um, first, good managers want their skip to know their team, because if I have a good team, it reflects well on me and it shows that I can step up to do more because I've built a good team. But you have to build trust with your manager. And I definitely don't recommend going around your manager to your skip with a crisis.
Hmm.
That should go through your manager. But when I talk about a problem or an opportunity, etc., I would literally go to my manager in a case like that and say, "Hey, we both want me to build a good relationship with your boss, my Skip, because we both need that support if you're going to rate me well. We both need that support for you to be rated well. We both need that support for you to promote me. So let me take him this thing that I'm working on. But I'll show it to you first. I'll tell you what I'm going to say. And you make it a team effort like that. Now, there are managers for sure who are like, never talk to my, what? You don't talk to my Skip. I ran into this. I switched under a different leader at Amazon. And that leader really didn't want me to talk to Jeff. They felt it was their job to throttle communication so Jeff's time wasn't wasted. I went around them and kind of pissed them off. So you can get away with it. But you have to be thoughtful about it, right? The key way I got away with it, this is important. I went to Jeff. Jeff replied to me and copied my boss because I had not copied my boss. And I had not copied my boss because I knew my boss wouldn't want me talking to Jeff. But my boss then weighed in and said, "Oh, you don't have to deal with this. I'll deal with this with Ethan." And luckily for me, I had made a good call. Jeff said, "No, I want to have this meeting." And so basically, my boss was screwed because Jeff told him, "No, get out of the way. I want to talk to Ethan." Now that was me for sure being a little salty and handle with care. That particular manager frustrated me, and I felt stifled, and I was willing to take a chance and see what happened. And I rolled the dice and won. But that was a measured gamble, and maybe what's the saying? Don't try this at home. So
Yeah, I like it. I'm glad it worked out for you.
yeah,
I have one more, and then we can open up to audience Q&A. But there's
sure.
one question that came up earlier in the chat, which said, I'm given some work that I don't find very exciting. I don't think it's related to the highest priority project or development at the company. How can I politely tell my manager I don't want to do that work? So I think, Ethan, you're really good at phrasing and using words effectively. So what would you say to this person?
So I am going to give you some phrasing for that, but I'll first tell you my dirty boss trick that I always used when I got this complaint. People would tell me, "Oh, this work is boring. It's not challenging." And I would say, "Great, automate it. If it's so simple, build a tool, automate it, streamline it." And then they would start telling me how difficult that was to do. And I would say, "That's interesting. It sounds like automating is a really hard challenge." So just be aware, like, not all managers are complete idiots, and we can play the game both directions. But what I would do in this situation, how I would advise the person who asked the question is, I would say first, I would go to your manager and not immediately complain about the work, but instead say, "You've asked me to work on whatever it is. Can you help me understand what the end goal is? What are we trying to accomplish? What is the business value? Why is this work important?" And then have that discussion. Remember, I talked about active listening. Be able to paraphrase back to them and say, "Okay, so you feel that it's really important we have these deep reports on our server load because of whatever reason. I've been thinking about our overall priorities, and it doesn't seem to me that that's our biggest priority." If that's still true, maybe they've convinced you. In other words, the point is maybe their answer will tell you something worth knowing that will change your mind. The second thing is, you can then ask them about working on other priorities. But the third thing, and the hardest reality, and the thing to say is, look, sometimes there is shit work to be done on teams, and I need someone to do it. And so the conversation to have, without using the word shit necessarily, depends on your relationship with your boss, is, "Look, I understand you need this low value work done. I will get it done, but I want reciprocity. I want to go do higher value work next. So can we have a clear agreement that I will go bust through this crappy work, but then I'm going to get to do something juicy? And I want to work on this. And so if I bust through this and get it done and I'm your reliable person, are you going to reward me? And if not, right, good managers will be like, yeah, that's the deal, right? Everybody takes their turn, cleaning the bathroom, as it were, and then you get to do the fun stuff. If that's true, you build that relationship that says, look, when needed, I will do whatever is needed. But I also care a lot about my career, and I'm not only going to clean bathrooms. So how do we balance that? And that's the discussion to have is I recognize that you need this done, but I don't want to be only doing this. How do we work that out? So have a help first, get rewarded later, and then in the end, you have to not be afraid to quit. In other words, some teams and some managers aren't good work.
Mhm.
And somebody has to do it, but it doesn't have to be you. All right. Open season. Bring on the audience questions.
Okay, and there's a lot of good questions in the chat. Here's what I'm thinking. To kind of we have time for maybe two. I would love to prioritize people who have the courage to unmute and say it to Ethan directly. Just I feel like it'd be kind of fun to have a bit more interaction. So if you're open to doing that, could you just please raise your hand in the Zoom and then I can unmute you. Okay, yes. Achi, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So my question is that manager churn is real, and sometimes reorgs change the leaders quite a bit. And you do have some leaders that you work well with and you like their style. And although they might like go to, for example, I work in machine learning and they went to like applied sciences, not really ML engineering anymore. Should you follow them around? Should you try to apply internally and move?
Generally, following good managers is a great idea. Managers have so much influence on your career. 70% of people quit. When they quit, if you ask them a couple of years later, like they may say, oh, I quit for more pay or because my spouse moved or whatever. But if you go back and ask them a couple of years later, 70% of the time, the reason someone quit, they didn't get along with their manager. At the same time, managers control the strings to promotions and everything else. And so obviously it matters where did your manager go and what type of work are they doing. But in general, I would rather work for a great manager on a marginal project than a random manager on a great project. Usually. Now, lots of details in that, but I would bias towards the person because you spend more time with this person than anyone in life, but maybe your spouse, and even maybe more than. So, like, have a good relationship. Okay, next.
All right, let's do Vaibhav.
Yeah. Hi, Ethan. I would like to ask you as something as a follow-up question to the fact that, when you say that you disagree with the feedback your manager just gave you and you ask for examples, what if you disagree with the examples asking that, this is what is the best I could have done at this point of time to unblock the project. And your manager says, no, you should have done this. For example, my manager said that even though you worked on really tight deadlines, you should have ensured that the code quality was better, and I say that this was the best code quality I could come up with in these tight deadlines. How do you disagree with that?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. The first is I'm going to challenge you and everyone listening. Remember, nobody likes to hear that their work isn't good, and we all tend to push back on it. So the first thing to really think about is, could I have done better? What do other people think? Is my manager the only one with this opinion? Because often we need to be kind of clubbed over the head before we admit where we can improve or we could have done more. So my only caution to you there, and in all cases for everyone, is remember, usually your manager is trying to give you valid feedback. Try to think about what could I have done. That said, in a case where you get examples and you still don't agree, then the question you have to think about is first, you can talk to your manager and say, hey, I disagree with you that I could have done more, But I'm open to learning better. Can you show me someone I should follow? Is there someone else in the team that you feel routinely does better than this that I can go learn from? Is there someone who can teach me? Can you give me an insight other than magically be smarter or completely don't sleep? Now, again, I'm phrasing this with a little bit, you want to phrase this more honestly and less sarcastically, but you basically are asking, I'm willing to learn to be better, but I don't know how to do what you're doing seems impossible to me, so help me out. And then if they just sort of pound the table and say, well, it's your problem, you know you have a bad manager. And what you should do is spend some time keeping them happy while you spend the rest of your time finding a better boss. But if they really start helping you or push more and say, yeah, look at this person and so on, at some point, you're either left with you have something to improve, or your manager is bad, you're going to have to leave, or it's just not a fit. But I will tell you this, if you're on your third job where you've gotten this feedback, the problem is you. And I share that because I have someone I coach, pays me a lot of damn money. He's on his third job, having gotten fired from 2 jobs, always and he's in trouble at the third job, always for the same behavior. The problem is him. And so, you know, and I say this as someone who had a lot of problems and I got myself fired a couple times. So push back, ask questions, but then if it's unresolvable, leave and be successful somewhere else. But if you get the same feedback again, look really closely in the mirror because it's you. All right, next up.
All right, let's do one more, and then after that, we'll just have the links one more time and wrap up. But let's do one last question. Sir.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can
Hi,
you,
Ethan. Hi, Rahul. My name's Sir Fame.
Sir Fame,
So,
perfect.
so my question is, how do I effectively present failures or problems in a way that shows accountability by not pushing the buck or naming names, and shows that I've reflected on the problem and like suggest things that I could have done differently without tarnishing my reputation, especially if it was a severe failure or widespread impact.
Yeah, that's tricky to answer quickly. My first answer, I guess, is if you haven't read it, consider the book Extreme Ownership, which talks about how to own things very deeply, and is written by military guys, nothing to do with me. But it might help you and give you some insights in how to do that. Second, remember, you don't tarnish your reputation if you show that you've learned. I tell a story, it's out on LinkedIn, of having a huge failed demo for Bezos and how I recovered it. And when I say it's on LinkedIn, it's actually in a Catalyst video on their website. So you can get some deeper, like, how do I do this? But basically, you have to talk about, okay, this is what happened. These are the lessons we learned. This is what's going to be different. You know, leaders actually like people who say, yes, I blew that. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do differently next time. Here's why it won't happen again and why you can believe that based on data. You know, because we've put in place this process or we've automated this thing or whatever. So think about, I know you're worried about your reputation. Here's the thing, though. You've